All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of Block Talks presented by Tezos here at South by Southwest. My name is Carolyn Rogers. I'm head of marketing here at Blokhaus, which is a marketing firm dedicated to the blockchain space, and specifically, we're focused on the Tezos ecosystem in particular. And I'm very pleased to be joined here today by Lindsey Eckhouse from McLaren, who is the Director of Licensing, E-commerce, and Esports at McLaren. And today we're going to be talking about the IRL impact of the Metaverse, in real life impact of the Metaverse, which is a very broad term. I think Metaverse is very undefined. It means something different depending who you talk to, I think. So maybe that's where we start, Lindsey. When you think about the Metaverse, what does it mean to you? How should we think about it for the sake of this discussion today?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Metaverse, as you say, means a million different things, and I think the definition changes depending on who you ask. For us at McLaren Racing, Metaverse is a virtual world, an experience, something that allows you in this new digital way, and we find that incredibly exciting.
Great. So how does technology enable us to create new experiences, communities in a virtual world? So we'll stick with that definition for the sake of today. But Lindsey, I want to talk about you and your background and understand where you're coming from. I understand you've got a long career in the sports world. What drew you to the sports world? Can you talk about your time in the different organizations you've been in, and what do you love about sports?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up an athlete, and I think sports really offers this sort of way for communities of people to celebrate a shared passion for something. And if you're the athlete, you learn amazing integrity, dedication, hard work, through being that athlete. So I was always super passionate about sports and really fortunate in that when I came out of undergrad, I went to a graduate program in Ohio University that specialized in business and sports administration. So I was able to sort of network and figure out a way to get into the space. So I started my career at IMG, which is now 160 over 90, working in brand strategy for different entities that were trying to deploy capital into sport and entertainment platforms. And then from there pivoted to the NFL, where I was for about 7 years, managing their international sort of fan engagement, sponsorship, commercial businesses, and really trying to quote unquote spread the gospel of the NFL in international territories. Then pivoted quite hard into esports, where I became commercial director at G2 Esports, which is a multi-team esports club out of Berlin. They compete in some of the biggest esports titles like League of Legends, Counter-Strike, Rainbow Six, and really fell in love with the platform and the ways audiences engaged. And that's probably where I was first immersed into more Web3 understanding and really started to dive deeper into that world. And then most recently joined McLaren Racing not quite a year ago to sort of lead our licensing, esports, and gaming businesses. What that means is on the licensing side, I work on our consumer products, apparel, fan merchandise. And then on the content licensing side, work very closely with Tezos to prop up our NFT program, our metaverse strategy, everything that we're really trying to do on Web3. And then from a gaming and esports perspective, it's how do we embrace those new areas to engage a new audience, really bring them into Formula One and some of our different racing platforms.
Wow, that's quite a career. I'm interested to know, in these different organizations, talk about the NFL, esports, now racing, what is your sense of these different sports fandoms, these audiences? How are they the same? How are they different?
Yeah, it's a great question. American football is such an interesting sport. So I grew up in Dallas, so not far from where you all are now. In Texas, American football is a religion. So I've always loved American football. I say that now because I've lived over in the UK for about 7 years. Um, and I was always really impressed with how omnipresent it was. High school football, where I grew up, was sort of what everyone did on a Friday night. I think Friday Night Lights came out and the world saw that this Friday night high school football phenomenon was a thing. And then going into the collegiate or professional level, you continue to see fans of all different types really engage in the sport. And I thought that was pretty incredible. And it wasn't just men being passionate about it. It was women, it was children, it was families. And I absolutely loved that. Then pivot to esports. It is a very young, incredibly engaged audience. And in a lot of ways in esports, it's one of the most community driven audiences I think I've ever seen. So at the NFL, you saw a lot of NFL sort of as a centralized entity, right? Running what happened, how different things showed up on the pitch or on the field. And then in esports, there were a lot of instances where the community actually really informed our team or the industry how it would operate. In a lot of ways, esports was sort of born from the community. So a long time ago, probably 25 years ago, a lot of different video game publishers were trying to figure out how to market themselves. And actually, they noticed that the community had already started to set up these little tournaments and by themselves. And ultimately, publishers sort of glommed onto that and said, this is a wonderful marketing mechanism for us to really get our games out there. And that's really how esports was born more as an industry. So it's been around, I think, a lot longer than people expect, but it started with the community. And I think that's a really different angle to sort of sports or entertainment that people maybe don't think about. Certainly in this conversation, community is certainly at its core. And now in McLaren Racing, I actually think it really brings both of those worlds together. So, F1 is, according to many, the pinnacle of professional motorsport. It is a complete spectacle, to say the least. I candidly wasn't a massive Formula One fan before joining McLaren Racing, and got into the Netflix show Drive to Survive and realized that there were so many stories, so many powerful narratives that sat behind what happened on the grid. And that's really what pulled me into that. And now that I'm working in it more, I see that there is sort of that balance of, okay, McLaren Racing's putting a lot out there for fans to engage, but equally the community and our fans are really asking of us, these are the things that we want to see. And then we're able to react to that and sort of bring them along the journey. So it's that balance of what I learned at the NFL in terms of maybe it was NFL led, then esports, where it was community led. And now we're bringing those two together really at McLaren.
Thank you for that. And maybe you can explain to people who may not be aware, what does the McLaren business landscape look like now? Can you talk about the introduction of the esports line a few years back? What are the different lines of business now that McLaren offers?
Yeah, so I work on the McLaren racing side of the business. We also have a sister company, which is McLaren Automotive, and they're the ones that make the sexy supercars that I'm sure you're seeing driving around Austin or Dallas. On the racing side, we have 4 different race series that we compete in. So Formula One is the biggest. That's our sort of crown jewel, right, of racing. We have IndyCar, which is one of our biggest sort of steps into the US and our initial way to really expand there. We took an ownership stake in AMSP last year. And then this year we started with Extreme, which is an all-electric race series that races in areas of the world most affected by climate change. So as a way for us to really sort of stick a stake in the ground as we are here, we're talking about sustainability. We know how important that subject matter is. Certainly when we talk about Web3 and blockchain, it's equally as important. And then esports was an area that actually McLaren was one of the first teams to really embrace esports back in 2017, start our team then. And the reason was simple. It was to engage sort of that new generation or younger generation of fan. We continue to race in F1 esports and continue to try to lead the front of the grid. But I think importantly are able to recognize that actually F1 esports and esports more generally is an amazing fan generator and fan acquisition tool for the broader Formula One or broader racing agenda that we have at McLaren. So we continue to figure out what are the different ways we can activate esports or casual gaming to really continue to embrace that next gen fan.
That's interesting because you touched on how the audience of the esports audience has kind of different characteristics and it's very community driven. Do you find that there's a lot of overlap between the new esports fans that you have that are coming in and traditional racing fans, or are they still pretty separate? What's kind of like the continuum of your fan base now?
We see a lot more similarities than I think you'd expect. It's just a matter of how you first get introduced to Formula One, actually. So in traditional Formula One, like real life racing, it tends to be that you get into it, if you're an avid fan, through a parent introducing you to the sport, just like you'd see in NFL, baseball, whatever. And oftentimes now it'll be, if you're more of a trend fan, as we call it, meaning more interested in the social aspects that the sport has to offer, perhaps you got into it because of Drive to Survive or because of a cool content piece that you found online. And esports offers us huge engagement with our audience, but it's probably more that trend fan that's starting to engage with us. So they are more interested in the social aspects the sport has to offer. They're excited about the accessibility that F1, the video game, offers in terms of how close it is to real life racing. Tangentially, I think it was 2 years ago, there was an F1 esports driver who took on a real life F1 driver in real life, and the esports driver actually won. So it's an amazing sort of experience in terms of bringing you into racing and making it really accessible to get into racing without having to pay, hundreds and thousands potentially of dollars on tracks experiences. So we see that trend audience really overlap a lot between esports and F1.
Great. So now let's go into the metaverse, the technology aspect of it, and I'd like to understand your role as director of licensing, e-commerce, esports. What are the goals that you have coming in, and talk to me about the discussions about Web3 and the metaverse that led to the eventual NFT drop that we can get into in a little bit.
Yeah, so from an objective standpoint, it's pretty simple. The first is engage fans, figure out a way to bring them into our fan funnel as much as possible. And we do that through a myriad of tactics. Certainly consumer products and merchandise is a great way to attract new fans. So when we're talking to our partners in Castor or New Era, and they're able to put our intellectual property on their products and put it in areas that maybe fans don't expect, it's a great way for a fan to first touch our brand and then come sort of down the funnel with us. The second piece is obviously, how do we use digital environments to engage the fan? And we'll get into that probably in a little bit in terms of NFTs, our digital touch points. But, I'll sort of take a step back and say, when I joined McLaren, which was April last year, Metaverse was something I knew a lot about. I would say internally, we were very much on an education path. And the sort of initial few months was all about educating the importance of decentralized backend blockchain, what Web3 is. So it didn't surprise or kind of concern people, and that it was a newer technology, and explaining what the metaverse was. And what I was really surprised and excited by in joining McLaren was how open everyone was to embracing that new world, learning about it, and really leaning into it, which we've been fortunate to do with Tezos and some of our NFT drops. But so going back to your original question, first objective is engaging fans. And then the second objective is commercializing that fan base. So all of the money that we generate as a business goes back to putting that car on the track so it can race. And so hopefully we can win championships. So everything that we do really goes back into that car. So it is important for us to figure out ways to generate revenue to fund that car going around the track and ultimately continue to engage our fans through the next few years.
So would you say that you kind of brought that blockchain Web3 point of view into your role at McLaren and said, hey, everybody, this is going to be a really interesting way to build new communities, to engage our fans? And did you receive any pushback when you brought that point of view?
No, the business was already looking at Web3, looking at blockchain, trying to understand it. I would say I brought a bit more understanding of the space and was able to demystify some of the preconceived notions and some of the hesitancy around the space. And to be fair, the business really pivoted quite quickly in terms of embracing it, which is great. Fortunately, your colleagues and some of the team at Tezos were able to help. So.
Yeah, great. So let's talk about that partnership. Back in June of 2021, McLaren announced that it selected Tezos in order to do an NFT drop regarding some of the cars and a collective. Can you explain what all that is and how it's been working?
Yeah, so it was a really exciting kind of fast timeline. The sort of ethos of the program was, how do we really create a community around our NFTs and on our digital collectibles that are completely based on Web3 and Tezos protocol. And for a racing team who, for the most part, engaged with traditional social media platforms and digital platforms, this was really new. So there was a level of education, as I said, that we went through. We were really excited by Tezos because of their sort of collaborative approach and the eco-friendliness of the technology. And being a motorsport business, actually, sustainability is something that we talk about a lot. So that piece of it was really critical for us. And then together we sort of defined, okay, this is what we want this to look like. The concept of the McLaren Racing Collective came from, we want all of our community members to feel very much a part of this. And as they own pieces of our history and own pieces of McLaren Racing, they are the community that we want to embrace, want to engage, and want to champion as we continue building the program. So that's why it was called Collective in the first place. And then we decided to launch with our hero asset, which in 2021 was our F1 race car, which is called the MCL 35M. That's a mouthful. But what we did is actually take that F1 car, blew it up into 22 different pieces. And each of those different components were built off of official CAD data from our engineering team. We were then able to 3D model out based on that CAD information. And that's the NFT that ultimately our collective were able to purchase and then collect to create the full car. And that was the first drop. We saw really strong engagement through that. We gave away a tire for free to sort of start it out before fans were asked to purchase each of the subsequent components, and saw amazing results. All of the pieces, for the most part, outside of maybe 2 sold out. We dropped them in different waves and honestly learned so much about how to communicate with the audience, how to be more transparent, how to leverage the insights that our fans were giving us to shape future programs. And that's really what that collective is all about. So we are taking in all of that feedback and always looking to iterate and enhance what we do with the program.
So basically, people could collect different pieces and parts of the car as NFTs, and there's a prize for putting the whole car together or something to that effect?
Yep, there was a prize for putting the whole getting all of the pieces. You got the actual full car issued to you, and we limited the amounts that we released. Only 35 people were able to make that MCL 35M. And then additionally, if you participated in that first drop earlier this year, we allowed fans to, call it, trade in those components and send them to the paint shop, get them back, and actually applied the Gulf livery that we ran last year at the Monaco race, which is this beautiful light blue and papaya car, and able to sort of participate in the next drop, which was open edition, more about getting as many people into the experience as possible. Instead of limiting the final number to 35, we really allowed as many fans as wanted to engage. And we're able to connect the program moving forward, build utility in each of those assets. So yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because we've been having several conversations over the past day or so about brands engaging in this way, using NFTs as a way to get fans engaged. But we've also talked about the importance of making sure it's not a one and done. You don't just drop the NFT and hope for the best. That there's some kind of longevity. There's some sort of plan or strategy for how will you use this as a way to engage these fans for the long term. And so it sounds like you're providing more opportunities for people who have participated, and it's not just in one and done.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we really want to make the McLaren Racing Collective a program that exists for years and years. I think the intellectual challenge of it is, how do you make every single drop cohesive and build off of the other while allowing new fans and new, people to get into the experience. And so that's always the balance that we're playing with. But it isn't just we've done 3 separate programs since we started, which probably amounts to like 10 drops with Tezos. And so far, yeah, we're seeing a huge amount of people engage. I think our next step is, how do we continue to get more of our 350 million fans around the world into the program? by maybe breaking down some of the barriers that exist in their minds around NFTs, whether that's more education, which I think is what it is, explaining the value in the program, why it's so different than what they're used to. And that's really what this year is all about.
And did you encounter any pushback or skepticism from fans at first? How did that go?
You know, we probably had around 40–50% of our fans as we started to announce this. They weren't, they were confused, I think is the right way to say it, or didn't understand the technology. And really, I put that back on ourselves. So we need to do a better job of educating our fans on, okay, this is what blockchain is. This is why Tezos is such a good technology in terms of the eco-friendliness, because that was the main thing that came out, is people were concerned about environmental impact from NFTs. And I think that's just a halo effect of, right, what you hear in the news. So again, as we continue the program, it's much more about us educating and sort of putting a megaphone behind all of the positive benefits of the program. And from the first drop we did, which was October last year, to the program we ran earlier this year, we've already seen more people embracing and new people coming into the program, which I think demonstrates we're starting to get better at really educating the audience on the importance and excitement that NFTs have to offer.
That's great. And do you have a sense of who are these fans that are participating in the NFT drops? Are they your esports fans, traditional racing? Are they brand new?
Yeah, so we are digging into that data right now. It's a great question. I was actually quite surprised to find, so they're all McLaren racing fans that have engaged so far. 50% of those, so we have about 10,000 people in our Discord server right now. About 5,000 of them are crypto natives. They get it. They love this space. They want to see huge digital utility in everything that they do. And then about 50% of our fans in this Discord server are totally new to the space and don't totally understand secondary marketplace, right? How to export assets into an external wallet. So we have to segment how we talk to each of these groups quite a lot to ensure that we're not leaving anyone behind and also not taking them far enough, which is a fun challenge that we'll take on this year. But in terms of who they are, they're younger. We know a lot of them are into racing, maybe not as much into esports, but definitely into the F1 real life racing side of the business so far. And part of that is all the drops we've done have been very F1 focused. We'll start to see some more race series come into play as we go throughout the year. And they are all over the place. So we just got a report last week that says it was something like 36 different countries for our last program. So it is genuinely this amazing way to connect with our fans across the globe.
Yeah, that's incredible because McLaren doesn't have, there's not really like a home base, a geographical home stadium, home base. And so you have these disparate people all over the world joining this community. That's really incredible. How has that changed the opportunities that you see in other parts of the business?
Yeah, I think it's one of the benefits of Formula One more generally is how global the sport actually is. That's one of the things I also loved about esports is it doesn't really matter where you are. You can watch and engage and enjoy it. Same with Formula One. I think as we look to the NFT program here, it means we have to be a lot more thoughtful and considerate on how we build real life offline utility into the program. Because offering somebody access or a special tour to our McLaren Technology Center in Woking, United Kingdom is amazing, but a very tough thing for somebody in Australia to come experience. So how do we create different, more virtual ways to engage them and build utility into what they're buying into? And so it's those types of things that we really start to map out and try to map out as far in advance as possible to make this program as kick-ass as possible.
And going through these different NFT drops, was there like a key set of learnings that you came away with, or was there something that just totally surprised you throughout this process, or did you know what to expect, or what kind of engagement reaction to expect?
I wish I knew exactly what to expect, but I would be lying if I said I definitely knew what was going to happen. I was surprised how quickly things sold out. I was also surprised at how knowledgeable a lot of our fans were. So I was very much, and we still look at this as we are targeting McLaren racing fans, and in most cases, our most avid fans to really engage in our NFT program. I've been surprised by how many of those know a hell of a lot about Web3, crypto, NFTs, and blockchain. We learn, I think, a lot from our audience and our community every day. So there's a few people on my team that work on this, and it's amazing some of the comments that we get, and really some of the recommendations that we are actioning in a lot of ways because it's so insightful and it's so authentic to what this community is looking for. And I think that's a really amazing space for us to be. And I'm happy we're getting that type of feedback. I'd say the biggest learning we had from the first couple of programs that we've run is the more transparent we can be about utility upfront as possible, the better. And then the more forward planning we can provide, and that sort of communicate that forward planning to this community, that's also really critical. And that's the hard part because as we continue to move forward and evolve, and this whole space continues to evolve, we don't know what the future holds. So we can say this is our roadmap, more or less, but that could change in 6 months depending on what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say how knowledgeable this audience happens to be, and it seems to be. Because just a nugget from the Blokhaus side, from the marketing side, because we promote this partnership as well. We run campaigns, and we've seen in our data that this McLaren audience happens to be quite engaged and efficient to reach, and seems to be responsive to this notion of Web3 and the Metaverse and technology in general. So it's an interesting observation. Not sure what to do with that, but there seems to be some kind of affinity between the racing world and the crypto, blockchain, Web3, future.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with if you look at the profile of an avid McLaren racing fan, and I can't speak to the rest of Formula One, but I'd imagine it's got some similarities. Um, they're really into the technical aspects of the sport. So the engineering prowess, the fact that there's 300,000 parts on an F1 car that are taken apart and put back together between every single race, which by the way is insane. They love that. So if you think of that technical expertise and interest, it kind of makes sense for that to translate into the Web3 NFT metaverse world. Um, I was more surprised by how quickly, to your point, they embraced that, or they had already embraced it, and then we're just transferring that over to us. One of the best things I think about working at McLaren is our CEO Zach Brown is incredibly engaged in the business and incredibly responsive and engaged with our fans. And actually, after the first couple programs that we ran with Tezos, he got feedback from fans on that program, and it was amazing. He got direct emails, direct messages on Twitter, and he forwarded that all to myself and my team just to say, like, what do you guys think? How can we evolve the program to really encapsulate some of this? And I mean, what a great place to be to get that type of feedback and to have a CEO that is excited by that versus concerned, right? And I think that's a really unique element about our fans that I'm very grateful for.
Yeah, that's great. And it does make sense to your point that people who are very interested in the machinery of a car and the technical aspect of racing, that they might have an affinity for, blockchain technology and the way other things are working as well. So that's just an interesting observation there. I would like to know what does the future hold for McLaren? What is the next phase of this NFT program or other programs that you're thinking of? Whatever you're able to share. How does this, how does the future look for McLaren?
And if I only had that handy crystal ball, I would be able to tell you everything. But I can tell you from a Web3 standpoint, we're incredibly excited about engaging the technology and grateful for partners that help us do that. Um, Going back to where I started, community and fans first, as cheesy as that sounds, is so important to what we do. The only reason we're able to race cars around tracks in 4 different series is because of our audience and because of the partners that help pay to access that audience and therefore put those cars on those tracks. So that community is really critical and really authentic to everything that we have going on. And if you think about blockchain, it is community first, right? It's got it at its core, and that transparency, that peer-to-peer nature of it is super exciting for us. So as we look towards the future, definitely looking to roll out more NFT programs and more drops, um, working with Tezos and some other partners to figure out how do we connect our NFT program to a metaverse, to a gaming experience. So there's more digital utility built into that program and go beyond maybe Formula One. So can we look at IndyCar? Can we look at Esports, which is that team is called McLaren Shadow? How do we bring some really unique programs into those spaces to engage those different audiences and continue to learn and take our community feedback as we enter into those areas? And so I'm hugely excited by that. One of the things that we did this past year, or at launch, which was mid-February, is we actually launched our MCL36, which is the F1 car name this year, in the Roblox metaverse. And while that's not Web3, still Web2, I think demonstrates the business's willingness to really embrace new technology. Car launch for Formula One teams is one of the most important moments of our calendar, which is kind of interesting since it's at the start. And our whole focus there was definitely ensure that we engage our avid fans, our partners, our employees, all of our key stakeholders around that launch. But how do we also get new fans engaged? And that's where the Roblox opportunity provided this brilliant platform to access their 50 million daily active users, which we saw, huge engagement from. So I think as we continue moving through the year and into 23, we'll continue to look at what are those major moments in the McLaren racing calendar that we can bring into different metaverse opportunities to try something different and do something different.
So bringing the McLaren brand, McLaren Racing, into other virtual spaces where people are already playing games with each other, building communities with each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And then vice versa, bringing our community, our fans onto those platforms, which is what we've seen with the McLaren Racing Collective. And then going back to that Roblox example, interestingly, we had the MCL36 available in 3 existing racing experiences on the platform. And they saw spikes of around 60% when we announced of people racing the car inside those games. So our fans are also following us into these spaces, which is great, perfect symbiotic way to work in the digital world.
That's fantastic. Well, very exciting stuff. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I know it's virtual, but still great to have this conversation. Is this the metaverse? I don't know. this setup right here. But great to have you, Lindsey. Thank you so much again. And we'll turn it back to the team and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you for having me.